and welcome to this screencast where we're going to add a field to Meteor-example-form-react, that sample application. And when we're done, what's going to happen is there's going to be this new field right here. You see a field called instructor. It's going to have two values. Pull down list, you can either select Philip Johnson or Cam Moore. Those are the two instructors for ICS 314 this semester. And the basic idea, it's pretty simple to do, but it does mean you're going to have to update the database to the schema for the database so that there is an instructor field with only two possible values, and then you're going to have to update the form for both create student and the edit student pages to display instructor field, and then actually, the insert or update call will provide that field as well. So that's what we're going to be doing. And I think it's a good way to kind of give yourself a chance to fool around with the form code and hopefully provide some insights. So before doing this, you'll get so much more out of it if you spend a little time familiarizing yourself with the template. So read through this home page, okay? Read it carefully, and then also invest 35 minutes into watching the screencast that I went through that kind of goes through this whole application. It's possible to kind of do this simply by watching the screencast and typing in what I type in, but that doesn't really, if you just do that and all you've learned how to do is copy what you see on the screen, you're gonna fall down hard when you get to having to actually do brand new things. So try to take your time. Allocate enough time that you can watch the screencast first. I'm not saying that as you do this there won't be things that will appear a little mysterious to you. That's natural when you've just been starting up with Meteor, but the more you kind of spend looking at the global picture, at least trying to get a global kind of conceptual map of things, then the faster things will start to fall into place, and it'll be less like, I don't know why he's doing this, but I got to type that, so I'm just going to type it. Next thing is to install the template, and this is real standard. You go to the GitHub page, and you're going to click the use this template button and create a repo. I've already gone through it, so I'm not going to do it again in the interest of saving a little bit of time. But you'll be able to do a Meteor npm install, Meteor npm run start, and heck, let's go to there we go. CD, what's this called? Meteor example. It was called, what did I make a copy of this? Is Meteor form 314. Thank you. Okay, so I went to here, then I CD into app, and then I do Meteor npm run. It's whatever. I'll type it. Okay, it's not going to install anything new, because it's just going to check a bunch of things. It's fine. And then I'll say Meteor npm run start. And this, depending upon your development environment, will take either not a lot of time, which is the case for me with I don't know what this is, a 3-year-old Macintosh, or it could take a lot of time if you don't have enough memory or don't have a solid state disk or a variety of other things. At any rate, that's going to crank up, and bam, so it's going. And then once that's there, we can say localhost. We can try to type localhost 3000, and there we have the basic Meteor-example-form-react create student unchanged. Okay, and then we're going to set up IntelliJ and ESLint. So you create the IntelliJ project. So let me go here, and here we are. I created the project already, Meteor form 314, and we want to again check to make sure that ESLint is running. So I recommend you can go a lot of places, but for lack of a better place to go, I went to import startup client startup.jsx, type in a couple new lines, and we get an error, and the error is an ESLint error. And so you can see ESLint is starting the error message. That's super important. So then we can delete this. We know ESLint's okay. Propeller S, change it back into the green check mark. Uh-oh. just typed up quit. Okay, so then we'll go back to the WAD. It says if Meteor is running, exit, invoke Meteor, reset to, so we'll do this just to go through the steps. So whenever you're doing things that alter the database, it's really important to make sure you start off with a fresh database so that you don't define a schema associated with the database and then redefine the schema, and then you've got inconsistent data. So typing Meteor reset is really a nice idea when it's the case that you're going to be fooling with the schema associated with the database and you don't want to have pre-existing data there. So I'm going to just do that. That's going to start up Meteor again. And while that starts up, we're going to start the timer. So I'll start, and then I'm going to create a branch called add instructor 1 using GitHub Desktop. So I type GitHub Desktop, I say new branch, add instructor 1, and then I got to publish this branch to GitHub. So I'll click that button. Again, when you use GitHub Desktop, things are really simple. If you're using the command line, things are less simple. I don't know how else to say it. The command line is really good. I know some of you want to use the command line. Command line is good for some extremely complicated Git situations you can get yourself into. But when you're using Git in combination with GitHub, this particular UI avoids a whole mess of problems. And so unless you're extremely skilled with Git, you have to be more skilled than I am with Git, I think, to actually be more productive with the command line than GitHub Desktop. And it's so easy to get yourself, once you're working in a team of people, believe you me, it's really easy to get yourself in a whole world of hurt unless you have extremely good Git skills. And the GitHub Desktop kind of keeps you out of trouble in certain ways. Okay, anyway, now we're going to add a new field to the student data schema called instructor, which can have only two values, Philip Johnson and Cam Moore. So let's go here, and here's student data, and here's the schema. And as you recall, hopefully from watching the screencast, there are certain fields here which are enumerated types, and we use this object to store these enumerated types and communicate it between the various places where the various forms that need to know about the enumerated type. So what I'm going to do to start is I'm going to define a new field, or define a new entry, a new field in this object called instructors. And I'm going to have it be bound to an array with two values, Philip Johnson and Cam Moore, because that's what we want. And then given that, I am going to essentially just duplicate this line, because level is also a, remember that's freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. That's also a very similar structural thing. It's an object, it's got an enumerated type with a certain set of allowed values. Hobbies is a little bit different because it's not required. We're going to say that instructors is a required field. And then and also in hobbies, you can have multiple multiple values that are okay. So anyway, we'll say level, and then I did a propeller D to duplicate that line, because most of the text is the same. And so what I did here is the field is instructor. It takes the allowed values from a field called instructors, plural. So a little tricky there, and you got to make sure you kind of type these things correct if you want to get it the same way. But other than that, that's basically all you have to do to the schema to make it to define this instructor field. Now we're going to say add the instructor field and its required values to student form schema. The default value will be Philip Johnson, and I just, it could have been either, really, and I'm parenthetically saying I actually teach more students each semester than Cam because I teach more sections. So maybe it's, a useful thing to default to me, but really, it doesn't matter. All right, so we got to go to student form schema, and remember that's down in here in the UI forms area of the application structure. Remember, this student data, this was a schema that's associated with the Mongo collection student form info is a schema that's associated with the form itself. Now, a lot of times when you see these examples in Meteor, you see the same schema being used both for the database and the form. And I don't like doing that because oftentimes your forms aren't exactly equivalent to a single collection. In fact, in this application, there's an example of that because we actually have two collections, enrollment and student data, and one form that combines both of them. So we have to have two forms. We're having a different schema that we use to define the structure of our form. But at any rate, we're going to do basically the same thing. And you can see we're passing in student data values, that object we just defined, we just updated over here. Okay, student data values. And we're going to import it as a new object, or as an object with the name data values. And what this all means is just like before, this level field has very much the same structure as what we want for the instructor field, as a pull-down list of only one acceptable value, which is nonetheless required. So I'll do a propeller D to just duplicate that line. It doesn't matter where in the list of objects. These things are not order dependent, so it doesn't matter really where we put it. Instructor, and I'll say instructor is the label. Allowed values are data values.instructors, plural. And then the default value will be data values instructors 0. Okay, and you'll see we're going to get a little error here, which ESLint error says you can't have lines longer than 120. It's a little unfortunate. So look, I guess this is as good a place as any to, or maybe here. We don't really have a definition for when we should do the. So I do a save just to get rid of these extra spaces that were causing ESLint troubles. So student form schema is now updated with the instructor field. Let's go back to our little cheat sheet. And now finally that our form schema is updated, now we can finally update the create student form to display the instructor field. And when we're done, the page should look like the screenshot at the top of this page. So we want that instructor field to go on that first line along with name and email. So let's figure out how we're going to do that. Go to the create student React component. Here's our form. And again, I'm going to say, you know what? It's just like level. So I'm going to propeller C to copy that field and then put it up here in this form group. And then, but instead of saying name level, I just have to say name instructor. And once I do that, if I go here and wait till it refreshes, you can see that we now have the instructor field being displayed. It's got those two values that we want. So that was pretty easy. And okay, now next update the submit function for the create student React component to extract the instructor field from the form and add it to the insert call. Right. So this is in the form, but of course we haven't really manipulated that form contents. So the first thing we're going to do is we see this const destructuring assignment where we take the data object coming out of the form and we're going to initialize all these variables. And so I'll just take the, I know that this field is going to be called instructor, so I put that in there to get a variable. And then I can just add it in here in kind of an arbitrary location. It doesn't really matter. And that's basically all that's required to get our data submitted. Okay, make sure we get it out of the data field and then make sure we add it to the insert field with the right name. And then, so we've updated the submit function. So now we have to see, did this actually work? Okay, so one way we can do this is to fill out the create student form and press submit. Okay, so let's go back to our refresh thing. And I'll say my name is Philip Johnson. My email is johnson@hawaii.edu. My instructor, I'll say Cam is my instructor. I am learning SE. And I'll be a freshman, and I've got a decent GPA. What the heck? Date enrolled, that's fine. No hobbies at the moment. And I'll say I'm a computer science major. So So I press submit, success. Okay, so the system believes that it was okay, but was it really? That's the big question. But so one way we can really assure ourselves that everything worked the way we want it to is to actually look in the Mongo database. Okay, and to do this, what we'll do is we'll bring up a new shell. So I'll click fish. It got me an, whoops, got me a new shell. And then I'll cd to GitHub. Oh, this I can go all the way here. And then I'll cd into app, and then I'll say Meteor Mongo. Okay, and now I'm connected to the Mongo database that this is running on the server. And then just for fun, I can type show collections to see what collections there are. And you can see there's two collections defined by this application, student data and enrollment data. So one thing I can do is I can do db student data dot find return, and I get the contents of that collection. It's got one entry, which is good. And I can scan along here till I see, great, there's a form called instructor, and Cam Moore is the value of it. So now I know, in fact, my insert worked. It's actually, demonstrably there in the database. So that's, if you want to use the command line, that's fairly cool and everything. But I tell you, for me, I would much rather use Robo3T. So I talk about this in the instructors. Alternatively, you can use the free Robo3T tool to inspect your local MongoDB database. So I can click Robo3T, which I've installed, and I've already set up a connection to localhost 3001, which is the port for the local Meteor Mongo instance. So I can just type, you can fill that out yourself, say new, or just type that in and say Meteor Connect. And here we are in the Meteor Mongo database. And if I click on Meteor and then collections and then double click student data, we can see right away the contents of that. And again, we can see, oh, great, there's an instructor field. It's got Cam Moore in it. All right, so this to me is a much better way. It's just a lot easier to look at, and you're double clicking rather than trying to remember crazy commands. All right, so that's good, but there's this other page in the system, which is the edit student page. And so to complete things, we have to make sure the edit student page works okay. So let's go back, and edit student looks really just the same, except for the way the actual submit form. But in our case, what we can do is basically go through the same process. We'll make a copy of this level and put it here, and make sure we rename it to instructor. So now it's the instructor field will appear in the form. And then up here, we need to extract instructor from the data. And then when we do our set, we got to make sure we put it in there. And then once again, we're going to have a little problem with line length. So I'll just type a new line and a save to get rid of that problem. And basically, there you have it. We've got everything we need here. And so, if we go back and go here, I have a link gets submitted when we make a new entry, so you can click to go to the edit form. But because the system got refreshed, let's just go ahead and we'll make one for Cam, and we can say he can be me as my instructor, another ICS instructor, and then his level, he's much more advanced than me, and he's got a great GPA. Maybe he has a hobby. Let's say he's surfing. And his major is, say, computer science. So I click submit, success, get rid of this, and now you can see there's an edit this data form. And if we click that, now we go to a form where we see that we've got this field, it defaulted, and then if we want to change this to Cam Moore, just for fun, we can click update. Student record was updated. And if we go to Robo3T, we can now see in Robo3T that the instructor field is now updated to, oh wait, we gotta double click this again. Okay, so here's Cam's record, and we can see that his instructor field is Cam Moore. Okay, I'm just kind of curious here about the real-time nature of this. So if we change this, click update, success, what is going to happen here? It looks like we have to double click that collection to see it re-retrieves it, and then we see the new field. All right, so we're done. So let's do a Control-C to stop Meteor. Where are you? Down here. And stop your timer, 15 minutes, let's call it 16 minutes again. Okay, so we'll stop the timer. And then the next thing is commit and push your add instructor 1 branch to GitHub with the add instructor 1. What was the message it's supposed to be? Instructor field implemented in 16 minutes. Okay, so we commit it to our local repo, and then we'll push those changes to GitHub. And there we go. And then, if you want to practice the WOD again, then basically all you have to do, is go back to GitHub Desktop, switch back to the master branch, create a new branch, call it something like add instructor, which is going to be made off the master branch, which is the original one, right? So if we go back to IntelliJ, we can see, hey, wait, there's no longer any instructor. Go back to student data, no instructor field. We've reverted by switching out of that branch and back to master. We've gotten rid of all those changes we made during the WOD. So you could continue on. You could create this branch and start over again. All right, there you have it. I think that's all I need to tell you for this. Hope that's helpful. Do it again if you ran into problems, and see you soon.